Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to this presentation. My name is Heather Christian. I am the archivist for VSSJ, and I thank you very much for joining us tonight for what I hope is going to be a great presentation and a good Q&A. Just a couple of housekeeping things first. This is being recorded and will be available on VSSJ's YouTube, hopefully in the next few weeks. In an effort to make sure it's a nice clean recording that future people will be able to benefit from as well. Please stay muted. There is a way, if you hover over your screen all the way at the bottom, there is a row of icons. The last one is mute. If you click on that, that will mute you. You put a little line around the microphone. And if you do have a question during the presentation, also on that bottom row of icons, there is a chat button. If you type your question in that chat function, I will be moderating the Q&A when Sadhna is done her presentation. And I believe Sadhna has slides or some other visuals as well. So in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a view button. If you click on view, you have the option of either gallery, in which everyone is a tiny little block on your screen. If you hit speaker view, the person who is talking, which is me right now, but will be Sadhna in a minute, you'll be able to see what's going on her screen larger than everything else. And one other quick thing, Giving Tuesday was yesterday. VSSJ is a small nonprofit. We are all volunteers. None of us are paid. This is all in our free time, and we do this because we love this. But we really are sustained through membership. And I just wanted to let you know that we do have a number of other events like this that are happening. We're trying to do 2 or 3 of these a month. And what really keeps us going are memberships. So we currently do have a special going that if you sign up for a 2 or 3 year membership or renewal, if you're currently a member, we will give you an additional year for free. So I will drop in the chat how you can do that if you're not already a member. And this offer is only available through the end of 2020, so it's not going to be around forever. And most of the members that join VSSJ really just like what we do, and they want to support a local-based nonprofit. And we also get business incentives from business members from time to time. We always pass that on to members. And one of the things we currently have is a few gift cards from Sprouts. If you are a member who is attending this event tonight, your name will be entered into a raffle to win one of those gift cards. If you are not a member, but you would like to become one, we're not actually going to do this drawing for at least 24 hours. So you either can email me, heather@vssj.com, or you can click on the link that I'm going to put in the chat if you're interested in becoming a member. Or at the very least, if you're not a member and you're not interested at this time, if you go to our website, vssj.com, all the way at the bottom of the screen, there is a spot where you can join our weekly mailing list. We send it out on Sundays. If you haven't opened it by Thursday, we send it out to you again. So you will not be spammed every day by us. And so that, I just wanted to remind everyone about that. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Sadhna. She is a longtime VSSJ volunteer who has put this whole presentation together, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing it. So Sadhna, you are welcome to take it away.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that great introduction. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let me know if for any reason it doesn't appear. Are we a go, Heather?
I can see your screen. I hope everybody else can too.
All right, great. So I will go ahead and get started. And thanks to everyone for joining the call today. This is called A Plant-Based Diet, Why It Matters. And I'll be providing information from various sources. And I'll just go through a quick run through of the primary resources. And they include, on the topic of health, the Harvard School of Public Health, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, British Journal of Nutrition, USDA, European Journal of Nutrition, and on the environment, sources include United States Government Accountability Office, College of William and Mary, Water Footprint Network, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, Bloomberg, USDA, Oceana, National Geographic, and the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. So we have cited various facts that you're going to be hearing this evening. All right, so what are the benefits of a plant-based diet? As we all know, plant foods are high in antioxidants, in minerals, phytonutrients, carbs, fiber, proteins, and fats. And plant-based diets offer many health advantages, including lower body mass index, lower blood pressure, reduced risks for chronic disease, and longer life. The China study studied the link between the consumption of meat and animal products and chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and bowel cancer. The study was conducted over a 20-year period in 65 countries, and the study concluded that people who eat a predominantly plant-based diet will prevent, reduce, or reverse the development of numerous diseases. And this book was published in 2005 and it sold just about 2 million copies. So now if plant-based diet is where you want to be, where do you start? Well, you just want to start, right? If that is your goal, you don't need to transition 100% immediately. The goal is to kind of get it going. And some folks who have tried to transition to a plant-based diet, either quickly or slowly, have not been able to stick with it. And they cite various reasons, including increased hunger, feelings of weakness, some vitamin deficiencies. They may experience weight gain. They think that there's not a range of palatable foods, not a range of food options, and they feel like they lack company or support. Well, these factors can be offset by taking care to incorporate nutrient-rich foods, not relying on processed and snack foods, which may be vegan, but frankly are neither filling nor very nutrient dense. You can check out various vegan recipe sites. You can stock up on certain core staples. Check out your local vegan and veg-friendly restaurants, read some veg blogs, and join some veg-minded groups. Those are just a few quick tips, but did you know that basically you can find vegan versions of your favorite meals and foods, from lasagna and creamy pasta to wings and burgers to cheesecake and pizza, even to cupcakes and brownies, some of my favorites. Also in grocery stores like Whole Foods, for example, there are vegan versions of cheeses, yogurt, milk, ice cream, and meats. There's even a vegan deli in Philadelphia called Love Deli, and that's love spelled as L-U-H-V if you're interested. So if you're short on time or you're craving the kinds of foods that you used to eat, you can swing by your local grocery store. But just note that if you prepare homemade versions of these foods, and if you opt for whole foods over meat substitutes, likely you will be able to steer clear of overly processed ingredients and chemicals. Store-bought meat substitutes are considered a bridge to a more wholesome vegan diet. So keep in mind that you can make your own burgers and your tacos, your cutlets and kebabs using protein-rich, healthy ingredients like tempeh, lentils, nuts, tofu, seitan, and etc. And finally, given the availability of all those tempting vegan desserts that you see on all these online blogs, it's not necessary to be a health nut, although it would be nice. So where do you purchase staple foods? Such as legumes like beans and lentils and chickpeas, or whole grains, or nuts and seeds. These all can be purchased in bulk from stores like Whole Foods or Moms. You can also get them from Indian stores, local Indian stores. And if you purchase them in bulk, that's one way of reducing your plastic footprint. One note is that these staples, these legumes, beans, grains, nuts, they do tend to contain certain compounds and enzyme inhibitors. And the primary function of these compounds is to prevent premature sprouting until conditions are optimal for the seed to sprout. Many of these compounds are beneficial to health, but they also tend to reduce the bioavailability of certain nutrients. For example, phytic acid is a compound you might have heard of, and it's a compound in these foods. It's a potent nutrient. It's good for you, but it also inhibits the absorption of primarily zinc and iron, and also calcium and magnesium to a lesser extent. So soaking and cooking these foods increases the mineral bioavailability of these nutrients. So cultures across the world with a history of cooking with legumes and grains and nuts have increased bioavailability to sufficient levels by using these preparatory methods. They've soaked and then cooked these foods, they've fermented, or they've sprouted these foods. These methods will inactivate these enzyme inhibitors and anti-nutrients and also reduce cooking time. After soaking the foods, a pressure cooker can be used to even further reduce cooking time. Instead of putting it in a pot on your stove, you can throw it into a pressure cooker. So a tip for soaking, the standard soaking time for these foods is about 8 hours. So if you leave it there overnight, that should be sufficient. Less time may be required for certain grains and seeds. And many soaking protocols recommend adding a bit of a medium to the soaking water. So if you're soaking grains or legumes, you want to add a bit of an acid, like lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. Usually people add like a tablespoon of that. And for nuts and seeds, you want to add a bit of salt to trigger that soaking and a deactivation of those compounds. And for nuts and seeds in particular, after the soaking, you can dry them at a low temperature in an oven or in a dehydrator, and then leave it outside to finish any drying if it's not completely dry. And you can just eat them right after that. Oats and brown rice in particular may benefit from an additional addition of a medium. If you add in some ground rye or wheat or ground up barley to the soaking water, that will enhance the deactivation of those compounds for oats and brown rice in particular, because those are a little bit harder to deactivate without additional mediums. So, basically, various nutritionists tout a bunch of food regimens, right? You've heard of the raw food diet, you've heard of the paleo, low glycemic, reduced calorie, and then there's also the frequent eating, right? You want to eat to speed up your metabolism. Then there's the intermittent fasting. There are rules about combining foods, this with that. You want to, some people are, tout the low oil diet, right? Or gluten-free diet. But at the very least, incorporate salads into your diet to ensure sufficient absorption of certain vitamins, like vitamin A, vitamin C, basically across the vitamin spectrum. And don't shy away from healthy fats like avocado, olives, nuts, seeds, and coconut. And if you like, you can always experiment with lower glycemic whole grains. Barley and steel-cut oats are great options for those. So as you can see in the slide, the Harvard School of Public Health recommends that about half of your daily food intake, according to Harvard, should consist of vegetables and fruits. And as we know, the best source of vitamins and nutrients and antioxidants is food. But it also is true, however, that today's soils do have less nutrients due to overproduction, use of pesticides, lack of crop rotation, and highly concentrated fertilizers. So if you find that you're deficient and you seek to supplement, just check your dosage limits and make sure that you're not taking too much, you're taking enough. Now, we know that there are some questions on specific nutrients in the vegan diet. The questions that we always get involve like calcium, B12, iron and zinc, vitamin D, omega-3s, and protein. So all these nutrients actually derive from plants and also from the animals that consume the plants in the form of meat. So the following foods will help you meet these particular nutrient needs that folks ask about. You want to focus on legumes and leafy greens, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Also, adding a good variety of fruits and vegetables will allow you to meet your remaining nutrient requirements like vitamin C, A, and magnesium. So let's review these nutrients, specific ones. So I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself. There we go. So for calcium, as we know, is important not only for bone health, but also for function of cardiovascular system, our muscles, our nerves, our hormones, and cell communication. So I've listed some examples here. And we also will list this in a resource site that we'll post up on the VSSJ website that I'll talk about more shortly. But just very quickly, examples of calcium-rich foods include collard greens, greens in general, bok choy, your seeds, navy beans, Swiss chard, and etc. You want to be careful of spinach because it does have a high oxalate content, as you might have known. It's not the best source of vegan calcium. In regard to protecting bone health, vitamin D and exercise are very important for adults and children. So not just calcium. You want to ensure, of course, you're taking vitamin D and you're stressing and giving good exercise to your bones and muscles. Vitamin D, interestingly, plays a role in calcium homeostasis. So calcium is actually extracted from your bones by your body to replenish levels of calcium in your blood when they drop. And then once those levels drop in your blood, then vitamin D acts to pull calcium back into the bone, and it pulls it from the intestine. So vitamin D and calcium have that kind of interaction. According to Harvard Health, 500 milligrams a day is sufficient versus the more commonly touted 1,000 milligrams. And food sources are generally preferable to supplementation. One note is that studies have shown vegans suffering from fractures likely is indicative of poor implementation of the vegan diet, as one such clinical nutrition study also shows no difference in fractures with vegans who consumed at least 525 milligrams a day from their diets. So, to note. And as far as calcium supplementation goes, there have been some mixed results. Some, not all, show that supplementing at the full 100% RDA or 1,000 milligrams, either with or without vitamin D, may result in some risks to your cardiovascular health, as well as to GI issues and kidney stones, and even AMD, age-related macular degeneration, and metabolic syndrome. But this may be due to inadequate intake of vitamin K, because vitamin K acts to inhibit the deposit of extra calcium on your blood vessel walls. So there's some sort of conflicting information as far as what the calcium supplementation should be, whether it should be the full 1,000 milligrams, but Harvard Health does recommend 500 and sees that as a sufficient amount. As far as milk goes, there have been studies that show that the high percentage of calcium in milk is actually offset by its lower rate of absorption from milk. According to Harvard Health, only 32% of the calcium in milk is absorbed. The absorption rate of bok choy, on the other hand, is 50%, and therefore bok choy is comparable to or even greater than dairy in terms of calcium bioavailability. Another interesting note is the majority of the world is lactose intolerant. So you might have known that. I'm sure you have friends who are lactose intolerant, and these lactose intolerant countries include South America. They're included in Africa, Middle East, East Asia, Latin America, and Alaska. Interestingly, the rate of osteoporosis in these countries is lower than that of the US, Canada, Northern Europe, Russia, and Australia. That may be due to higher levels of exercise in those countries and greater sun-induced vitamin D absorption in those countries, because those areas are sunnier versus, say, the US. But this note does appear to show that foods other than dairy can protect our bone health. And for example, in journals including the European Journal of Nutrition, whole food sources of soy, including soy milk, have been shown to improve bone health in postmenopausal women. So next, we spent a lot of time on calcium just because there are a lot of questions on that one. Let's move on to iron. Iron is important in oxygenation and energy and metabolism. You can find it in legumes and leafy greens, and seeds. The daily RDA for iron is 17 to 21 milligrams a day. And it's important to note that vitamin C will increase your absorption. So if you add vitamin C to your salad, to your food, you'll get more iron. Next, vitamin K. Vitamin K, K2 is what you might have heard of. It plays a role in bone and cardiovascular health because it helps with the absorption of calcium, as we noted earlier. It prevents arterial calcification. You can find it in various vegetables and fruits, for example, leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables. Various studies, for example, the American Journal of Gastroenterology, cite the ability of gut bacteria to convert the K1 found in plant foods into sufficient amounts of K2. So you can get that K2 from your plant consumption. Next is zinc. Zinc is interesting. It's important to wound healing, to immunity, regulating inflammation. It's even important to your learning, your eye health, your digestion, and fertility. And you can find it in legumes, in tofu, tempeh, nuts, and seeds. And the daily RDA is 8 to 11 milligrams. Just keep in mind that legumes are a primary source of vegan zinc, so you may want to pre-soak legumes before cooking to increase your zinc bioavailability if you find that your zinc levels are low. Omega-3. Those are important across the board, from your brain health, your heart health, joint health, metabolism. It's anti-cancer, anti-inflammation, and vegans can obtain sufficient omega-3s via various plant-based sources, and these include chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, purslane, zucchini, summer squash. About 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds a day should help you meet your omega-3 needs. Now, there has been discussion as to which fatty acid is better for humans. Is it the ALA that's produced in plants or the DHA produced in animals? Both are important. Studies show that DHA is produced in the human body efficiently from ALA. For example, studies from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and others show that ALA converts to DHA efficiently in diets devoid of dietary DHA. So if you're not consuming DHA on a regular basis and you're consuming ALA, your body will convert that to DHA. The studies also found DHA end products in the bodies of people who consume ALA. And also they found that ALA readily converts to DPA, which is a DHA precursor. So studies are bringing to light that ALA is a potent omega-3 fatty acid that's found in plants. If you prefer to take a DHA supplement, which is fine, there are vegan supplements that exist, and these are derived from yeast and algae, which is also where fish happen to get their omega-3s. So that's important to note. I know a lot of people do like to take their DHAs. Iodine is important for growth in pregnant women and children. It's also important for brain function, metabolism, and hormone balance. So iodine is not naturally occurring in milk. It's actually added in the production process when milk is produced. It's also obviously found in salt. So for vegans, if you take reduced salt or non-iodized salt, keep in mind that seaweed, in particular, wakame and nori, have up to 60% of the daily RDA of iodine per serving. Wakame has more than nori. The daily RDA for iodine in adults is 150 micrograms, and that's provided by approximately 6 to 7 grams of nori, which is approximately 3 sheets. I'm not sure if you want to eat that every day, but you can always supplement with some seaweed. Keep in mind that hiziki and kelp are not recommended because they do have some toxic contaminants and or high iodine content. So I believe kelp out of the two has high iodine content, which is too high, and I believe hiziki is the one that's recommended. And if you're consuming seaweed, just take care not to take more than you need. You don't want to be taking too much iodine in your body than you need. And also ensure that your seaweed is produced in clean water. So take a look at the companies that's producing your seaweed. Of course, you can always add a little iodized salt into your diet. And getting closer to the end of this list, vitamin D. It's important to your bone health, immunity, neuromuscular system, cell growth, and like some other vitamins, it's important, it may be important to multiple body systems and may be generally preventative of disease. The prescribed daily limits vary for vitamin D. And we do know that it is harder for North Americans to obtain in general because we do get a lot of vitamin D from the sunlight and we do have winters in our region. The primary dietary source for non-vegetarians is fish and fortified foods. These by themselves are likely insufficient without supplementation. So according to studies published in the journals of dermatoendocrinology, epidemiology, and photochemistry and photobiology, sufficient vitamin D can be obtained through sensible, protected UVB sunlight exposure during warmer seasons. So the recommended amount of daily time outdoors in the mid-latitude region, which is our region, can range from a couple minutes to 75 minutes, and it depends on your skin tone, the time of the year, and the time of the day. But in the Northeast, the general recommendation is 15 to 30 minutes, March through October in the midday sun, so around noon. Lighter tones will require 15 minutes, deeper tones will require 30 minutes. So 15 to 30 minutes outside of winter around noontime. And that should help you get your requirement of vitamin D. But in the book, The Vitamin D Solution, Michael Holick, who is a professor at the Boston University School of Medicine, provides timetables similar to what I just described that estimate how long to spend outdoors. He also prescribes about 2,000 to 3,000 IU of vitamin D a day for adults from any combination of dietary sources, sensible sun exposure, and supplements from any combination of those three. So tips on sensible sun exposure, what does that mean? Basically, the hours around noontime are the most efficient. It's when you will get the most out of the UVB rays. You want to expose no more than 20% of your body, basically your arms and your legs. You can expose more if you like, but that's sufficient. And you can wear a hat to protect your face. You don't want to apply sunscreen during this brief period of time. During the rest of the day, you may if you want, but during this 5 to 30 minutes, you don't apply sunscreen, but do not allow yourself to get sunburned. That is the risk factor, right? The goal is to achieve a light pinkness in your skin in about 24 hours. So for those who do get burned, I personally don't burn much, but if you do burn, you shouldn't have to exceed about 50% of the time it takes for you to get a sunburn. Up to 50% would be enough to get that vitamin D. And finally, wintertime is not conducive to vitamin D production in the northern parts of the US. But interestingly, the body is able to store accumulated vitamin D in fat cells that might tie you over through the winter months in addition to your supplements. So monitor your D levels, and in the colder seasons, as I mentioned, you can take D vitamin supplements and fortified non-dairy foods. Another interesting note is that mushrooms exposed to sunlight have been shown to produce considerable quantities of vitamin D. And this is according to the USDA. This food may also help you meet your vitamin D quota. So research that, decide if you want to put your mushrooms out in the sun before you eat them. Also, D2 supplementation in various articles has been shown to be as effective as D3 supplementation after normalizing for the D3 produced from sunlight. But you can get vegan D2 and vegan D3 both in supplement form. The last one here is B12. So this is a big one, right? Because it's important for cardiovascular health, for brain function, and for energy. And so if taking supplements, this is one that you want to take if you're a vegan. B12 is produced by bacteria. And in today's sterile environment, plant foods are devoid of such bacteria. It is still found in meat and dairy, which is why you can get B12 from those sources. So as published in the Journal of Molecular Nutrition and Food Research, and as explained by Dr. Greger in Nutrition Facts, Dr. Greger recommends absorbing about 4 to 7 micrograms, which is above the RDA of 2.4 micrograms for adults, but it's in line with European standards. So only a fraction of supplemental B12 is absorbed. So this 4 to 7 micrograms corresponds to a daily supplemental dose of 50 micrograms. And you can find supplements that have quite a lot more than that. But according to the research that Dr. Greger has has done in the Nutrition Facts website, which you can research, he concludes that 50 micrograms is enough. And there are vegan food sources that actually contain the active form of B12 to help meet your daily requirements. The active form being a cobalamin. I'm not going to pronounce that again, but it is the active form, and it is the green or purple laver, nori, right? That actually has B12. So 2 sheets of nori, or approximately 2.4 grams, provides you with about half of your daily requirements of B12. You might have heard of fortified nutritional yeast, right? We've heard that that is a good source of B12. But there have been questions as to whether fortified nutritional yeast contains MSG. And so folks can do their research on that one. Nutritional yeast is frequently used in vegan cheese recipes. So if you are looking for alternatives, you can just Google on the web, vegan cheese, no nutritional yeast, and you'll find options out there. I haven't tried them myself, but I am looking forward to trying them out. You can also search for nutritional yeast substitutes, and one of them will be listed in that resource website that we'll be posting on the VSSJ page shortly. So finally, rounding out the nutrition discussion is protein. So that's a big one for vegans, right? We get lots of questions. And it is important to note that different plant foods do not need to be combined in each meal, because all plant foods do have adequate levels of all essential and non-essential amino acids. So per Dr. Greger in Nutrition Facts, and as written in the Mammalian Protein Metabolism Journal, the body actually maintains a pool of free amino acids to assist in the formation of proteins if you're low in any one particular amino acid. And so what are vegan sources of protein? These include beans, spelt, lentils, chickpeas, whole grains, peas, tempeh, tofu, edamame, nuts and seeds, and also green veggies. So your legumes will give you more, your veggies will give you slightly less, but you combine them all and you get enough. How much protein do we need? So the daily RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of weight. That's 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. And you can put your pounds in that calculation, because I know in the US we don't calculate on the basis of kilograms. So some nutritionists actually recommend a minimum of 0.5 grams per kilogram. So for a range of 0.5 to 0.8 grams per kilogram, this works out to 32 to 51 grams a day for an individual who weighs 140 pounds. And so you can work out what does it mean for your weight. Vegans actually do get enough protein. An article in a journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics show that on average, vegans get 70% more protein than they need every day. Meat eaters get about 75 to 80% more. So they're actually pretty similar based upon what they're eating and how nutrient dense their foods are. And according to research by the USDA, the one nutrient that most Americans is significantly deficient in is fiber. Fiber is readily available in vegetables and has been associated with a reduced incidence of multiple chronic diseases. And vegans do more closely reach their dietary fiber requirements. So too much protein, however, is not optimal. Excessive protein intake has been shown to leach calcium from the bone. Further, any protein that does not get used by the body, as explained by Milton Mills, who is a Stanford professor, any protein that does not get used by the body actually gets converted to carbs. And finally, excessive animal protein has been linked with chronic diseases, which is why transitioning to plant-based diet reduces your occurrence of these diseases. I mean, there has been a bias towards extremely high protein intake. So in the United States, the daily RDA, which is your daily quota for protein, has decreased over time. It was 3.3 grams per kilogram of body weight in 1948. And then it reduced to 1.3 in 1974, and it's 0.8 now. So we're transitioning away from fatty, protein-rich foods into more vegetable and plant and fibrous foods to at least round out our plate. So finally, herbivores. Herbivores get all their protein from plants because that's all that they eat. Yet they are among the largest and the strongest mammals. And these include horses, giraffes, elephants. Proportion-wise, they don't eat more than we do. So compared to humans, these herbivores eat a similar percentage of their body weight. It's not like they're just eating tons and tons relative to how big they are. So the question that plant-based promoters pose is, why not cut out the middle person? Cut out, the middle person and go straight to the plants. Another point that Milton Mills from Stanford University has pointed out is that humans actually share more traits with herbivores than they do with either omnivores or carnivores. So this is in terms of such attributes as mouth size, jaw motion, the way we eat, the type of teeth we have, how we chew and swallow, the acidity in our stomach, the length of our digestive tract, even what our salivary glands do, what they're capable of digesting. I mean, it is true that herbivores are known to have the capacity to eat meat. So they can eat meat, but clearly they're not meant to. But what about carbs? We've been talking a lot about proteins. Carbs are important for brain function. So we'll close with this interesting point, some food for thought that you can accept or not accept, but it's always fun to think about these things in evolutionary terms. Some scientists believe that it was early humans' focus on fruits that gave them an evolutionary advantage. Other scientists also question the importance of meat consumption in early brain advancement. Kerry McCarthy from the University of Stirling explains that it is probable that brain advances actually occurred prior to the origins of hunting and meat consumption and not because of it, simply because hunting and meat consumption would have required a pre-acquired ability to manage fire and to develop weapons. So how did they learn to develop weapons before they had the need to use them in hunting? Well, they must have been eating something other than the meat, right? Nuts, seeds, they were foragers basically, and that's how they developed their abilities. This is what Kerry believes. But in general, athletes and bodybuilders do need to ensure appropriate carb intake to maintain their muscle energy, because proteins form the building blocks of muscle, but carbs allow the muscles to work, right? Carbs provide the energy to the muscles. It is true athletes may need to consume twice the standard requirement of 0.5 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's very true. But because most Americans, including vegans, consume almost twice the protein requirement, athletes probably are doing so already without having to substantially increase how much that they eat. Bodybuilders can also be able to retain their strength by increasing their levels of food intake without having to resort to protein powders. Final note on nutrition before we wrap that up is soy has not been shown to negatively impact hormone levels in women or in men. And this is due to lower blood concentrations relative to estrogen. The phytoestrogens don't take up a large part compared to estrogen. It's actually a small portion. And also due to the use of different hormone receptors. Phytoestrogens link up with different hormone receptors than estrogens do. So they don't compete. Phytoestrogen doesn't compete with estrogen for its receptors. But soy has been shown to improve bone health in menopausal women. So that's important for folks, women who are a bit older. So let's move on to environment, right? And I can take questions at the end. I'm sure that was a lot, but I'm happy to entertain any questions on health toward the end of the discussion. So talking about environment, this is a big switch now. Let's first talk about land impacts of animal agriculture. So some impacts are deforestation and overgrazing. Um, so in order to create enough land to produce meat, humans generally do take down forests and replace them with grazing land. This does tend to result in desertification, and desertification itself results in other global pressures, including poverty, overpopulation, if it's not usable anymore. Also, desertified land isn't anchored by vegetation. So it does result in increased flooding, soil erosion, and increased global warming if there aren't any plants in that ground to capture carbon. Overgrazing itself is responsible for 33% of global desertification when land is overgrazed. In Europe, this percentage is as high as 42%. In Africa, it's 58%. In Australia, it is 90%. So what is responsible for the remaining causes of desertification? It's deforestation and agricultural activity. So there are proponents of silvopasture. Silvopasture is a way of raising animals that is in the interest of reclaiming and regenerating land and offsetting climate change. What it does is it converts unused non-arable land into grazing land. And so it replaces the land with grasses and animals and so forth. And the land tends to get a little more fertilized from the animals that are using that land. So it seeks to offset the negative impacts of grazing by increasing the movement and the density of herds. By moving the herds around from place to place, they won't overly use up any particular area, and so forth. So those are the positives of silvopasture. The opponents, however, state that silvopasture does release carbon due to the soil disturbance of all the hooves on the ground. It does cause soil compaction for the same reason, and because cows produce methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas, that's not good either. Interestingly, land that has been allowed to recover from grazing has been shown to increase carbon sequestration. So opponents of silvopasture include the Sierra Club, International Journal of Biodiversity, and Agricultural Systems Journal. That's silvopasture from an environmental perspective. So we talked a little bit about deforestation. So it's important to know, according to a 2017 study by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, up to 55% of global deforestation can be reduced by decreasing animal product consumption. This obviously has a significant impact on carbon capture and global warming, since trees capture a lot of carbon from the air, also impacting biodiversity in those forests and air quality. Rainforest destruction. This is really the crux of the debate over deforestation. So meat production truly is a leading cause of rainforest destruction. As we know, rainforests are vital carbon sinks. They help regulate global temperature, and they mitigate climate change, and they're a source of rich biodiversity. So the recent 2019 and 2020 fires in the Amazon that have received a lot of attention are directly tied to cattle ranching activities. Brazil is the world's leading exporter of beef. According to research reported by the Rainforest Partnership, at least 50% of global rainforest destruction is due to cattle ranching. In the Amazon rainforest, this level is as high as 70% or more, and that percentage is even higher after accounting for soy production because 80% of the soy produced in the Amazon feeds cattle. So rainforests are big when it comes to animal agriculture. And then what about water? Oh, I skipped the slide. Water, meat production does take water. According to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, it takes about 10 times more water to produce beef than it does to produce wheat. And most of this water is going into the production of feed crops to feed the livestock. So growing feed crops for livestock uses 50% of the water in the US. And then what about waste? Farm animals, and this is no surprise, produce as much as 100 times the amount of waste as the entire US population. And we do know that the waste from factory farms is responsible for various health issues in vulnerable populations that live close by. And it also pollutes nearby waterways with heavy metals and excess nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, greenhouse gases. A study conducted by the United Nations in 2002 found that meat production causes more greenhouse gas emissions than the exhaust from all forms of transportation. So it was estimated in that study that animal agriculture causes 18% of all greenhouse gases. Some studies cite that percentage as high as 51%, but 18% is a conservative figure. And so how does animal agriculture increase greenhouse gases? So first of all, fossil fuels are burned to produce the fertilizers that are used in producing feed for the animals. Then methane is released from both animal respiration and from the breakdown of fertilizer and animal waste. Carbon stores are lost, as we mentioned, due to deforestation and desertification. Fossil fuels are used in the production of feed and in the slaughter of animals. And fossil fuels are used to produce and transport both processed and refrigerated animal products. So Project Drawdown, which is a pretty well-known group, it's a large nonprofit, and it assesses solutions to climate change. It's got upwards of 80 to 90 solutions, if I'm quoting that number accurately. And it identifies plant-rich diets as a third most effective solution in terms of sequestering carbon and mitigating climate change. And that is if 50% of the world's population adopts a plant-rich diet. So imagine the impacts if a great percentage of the world adopted a fully plant-based diet. From 50% plant-rich to even more than that, what would happen if they were even more plant-based? Not plant-rich, but really plant-based. So what about land use? So there's an interesting book called Diet for a Small Planet, written some time ago by a very smart lady. And according to this book, the same amount of land that is needed to feed one person who is consuming the standard meat-based American diet can feed 14 people on a plant-based diet. That's a ratio of 1 to 14. And this is due to differences in food efficiency. Basically, large amounts of feed are required to sustain livestock. And that amount of land can instead be used to grow the amount of crops that would be required to sustain humans. And as we discussed earlier, there are plenty of protein and carb and fat-rich foods that are available to sustain ourselves on. So indeed, as per Bloomberg, nearly half of the contiguous US is devoted to animal agriculture. And you can see that's like the big middle part of the US. We all know that, right? And of all existing agricultural land across the world, 80% of all agricultural land is used to raise livestock or to grow the grains to feed them. In addition, at least 50% of all grain produced goes to livestock. Basically, the world produces 1.5 times enough food to feed everyone on the planet. And so it can be assumed that poverty can be alleviated by reassigning feed crops from meat production to human consumption. In Ethiopia, for example, more and more land is being dedicated to grazing, where 20 times more food could be produced on that land via farming. And so poverty in developing countries could be alleviated by converting grazing land to organic farmland. One interesting thing is the ratio of animal populations has morphed over many years of meat production. According to the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, of all the mammals in the earth, 60% is livestock. And of all those mammals, only 4% are wild, and the rest, the 36%, are us. So livestock actually doubles humans and more than triple or quadruples more than that of wild mammals. So next, according to information from the United States Department of Agriculture, it takes about 7 pounds of grain to get 1 pound of meat. And it takes 2 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of poultry or herbivorous fish. So livestock and fish are very nutrient hungry, and that's been well established. What about the effects of fishing on our ecosystem? So what does fishing do? As many as 40% of fish caught globally every year is discarded, per the Oceana magazine. That is 63 billion pounds of bycatch. That also means that as many as 2.7 trillion animals are pulled from the ocean each year. So that's a lot of waste, right? It is important to note from an animal welfare standpoint that when pulled from the ocean, fish, including those that are caught and released, suffer extreme decompression, and that tends to result in severe internal injuries, including ruptured swim bladders and even stomachs protruding from their bodies. And as we know, fish do suffocate when they're pulled out of the water. What else about animal welfare as we branch into our third topic? We do know that animals, birds, and fish experience shortened lives and cruelty and suffering in factory farms, including confinement in unhygienic confines with very limited movement. They do suffer from amputations and surgeries performed without anesthesia. Chickens in particular do grow lame due to overgrown skeletons because of the rate of growth that they are subjected to. And babies are routinely removed from their mothers. So this treatment does appear to result from our perception of animals as commodities and truly from a mental distancing of out-of-sight farms, right? We don't see them, we don't know what goes on there. You know, grass-fed cows and cage-free birds, that is an option, but those options don't address the issues of forced impregnation or constant milk production or the separation and isolation of newborns like calves and chicks. And it is true that unneeded male baby chicks are destroyed and in an inhumane manner at that. So, you know, it may be true, it may be that the humane treatment of animals raised for food is not feasible, especially when compared to other animal species or with our animal pets in terms of how they are treated. Plant-based diets can help prevent this severe suffering and needless suffering. This is just a picture of, sorry to have left a slide on this, but this is a picture of cows being milked and male calves who are kept in small enclosures to ensure that their meat is kept tender. And of course, these are pigs. So that had to be discussed, right? Just from an ethical standpoint, a reality standpoint of where this meat comes from. So to wrap up our discussion, we know that these athletes and celebrities all have something in common. And so, you know, many athletes and celebrities are embracing the vegan lifestyle, and they cite various benefits for doing so, including improved energy, improved appearance, weight loss, allergy relief. So all the folks in this slide are vegan, except for two who are vegetarian, and those are Kate Winslet and Johnny Galecki. So folks like Natalie Portman and Olivia Wilde, Cory Booker, who ran for president, and from our native New Jersey, James Cameron, Carrie Underwood, Sia, they are vegan. What about vegan athletes? So these athletes credit veganism for improving their performance. All of these athletes are vegan except for Hannah, who is vegetarian. So these include a pro wrestler, bodybuilder, track runner, football player, and so forth. Interestingly, many of these athletes became vegan I mean, they became vegan at least partially in order to improve their performance, or they noticed that their performance improved after they became vegan. Um, they also have health reasons that they could have converted to vegan for, but they do in general cite greater stamina, greater energy, greater muscle recovery, and they're able to meet their protein needs. And finally, Greta Thunberg, who is a young Nobel Peace Prize nominee, is a vegan. And what about the Vegetarian Society of South Jersey? So this is the organization to which I belong. And if you are looking for resources or support, VSSJ's newsletter is a nice place to start. Just send an email to info@vssj.com. It's info@vssj.com. And this organization can help you access various resources, including webinars, particularly in its newsletter, webinars, recipe ideas, information on nutrition and health. You'll find out about cooking classes. You'll read up on the latest news, and you'll find out about new restaurants and food brands that are out there. As a group, historically, VSSJ provides a support community, and they host potlucks, restaurant trips, baking events. They provide food and information booths at fairs and others. So once this pandemic is behind us, VSSJ is going to be active in those activities. So what does membership provide for you? Membership will help you get discounts to various local restaurants and businesses in New Jersey and Philadelphia, as well as discounts or free admission to VSSJ sponsored events. Right, so here are all the participating restaurants and businesses that offer you discounts due to being a member of VSSJ. And finally, as I mentioned, VSSJ will post a resource guide on their website, which is vssj.com, and it will include links to online resources, including recipes, eating out guides, businesses that deliver meals, baking tips, local events, nutrition info, and stores that offer plant-based products. And that will be provided in the newsletter that will be distributed this Sunday. So keep an eye out for that newsletter that will be shared on Sunday for a link to that resource guide that will be posted on the website. And you can join a newsletter by sending an email to info@vssj.com. And finally, in January, there's this group called Sustainability Now. They're an environmental group, and they are planning to hold an event with a plant-based theme. So Sustainability Now, so you know what they're about, they're engaged in the exploration and proliferation of cutting-edge sustainable technologies that solve planetary problems. They're an environmental group. So please be sure to check their website, Sustainability Now, for this forthcoming details on this event. All right, and so that is all I had. And I do want to, of course, take Q&A with Heather. And I can close up this presentation and open up for any questions that anyone might have. If you posted them in a chat, you can always send an email to VSSJ at a later point in time. But happy to entertain any questions.
All right, thank you very much for that, Sadhna. That was a lot of information. It was all very good information, though. No one asked any questions in the chat, but if someone would like to ask a question in the chat, I'd be happy to give it out to Sadhna. And although we are a pretty small group, so I think if someone wants to unmute and just ask a question, I think that would be okay. It's not like we're a super large, 20+ person group. But if anyone has a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask it.
Yeah, that was a lot of information, so I'm sure you're just trying to noodle all of that at this point. But
I do actually have a question for you, Sadhna, which is more of a personal question. How did you become a vegetarian? Were you raised a vegetarian? Can you talk a little bit about your journey as to why this interests you?
Sure. I was raised vegetarian. I am Indian American, and so it has never been too difficult for me to figure out what to eat and how, because a lot of folks in India do consume a lot of plant-based foods. And that's just how I was raised. And I did become vegan a number of years ago once I learned about the kind of the realities of the dairy and egg industry. And I was interested in understanding how I can make that easier for myself. So I've done a bunch of research since then to make the journey easier for myself. But for me, it's a different story because I've always really been vegetarian. It wasn't so deep of a switch. So I can understand for folks who have never been vegetarian or vegan, if they have questions, if they need to access resources. And so, that's what we're here for. But personally, I was just able to answer a bunch of my questions by going online and researching things here and there.
Okay. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay. I guess I can talk a little bit about this. I am 32 and I have been a vegetarian for, I guess, about half my life now. I did have a 7-year stint being a vegan, during which time I had a completely vegan pregnancy. And the first few years my daughter was alive, we were vegans. We're now lacto-ovo vegetarians. We live with several non-vegetarians who really do like my cooking. So we eat a lot of vegetarian food, but it is interesting. My daughter, who is now 7, is getting to the age where right now she's not going to school. She's doing virtual school because of the pandemic. But she is having questions about last week. They were talking about Thanksgiving. Her teacher was asking what everyone was going to eat, and Iris, popped up and just said she was not having any turkey. And some kids were very surprised by that, and she gave a very nice, appropriate for a 7-year-old, reasoning for why she doesn't eat turkey, and she likes turkeys alive. And it's interesting to me to talk about when I became a vegetarian when I was a teenager and how that evolved when I was in college. And then becoming a parent and so on and so forth. It's just interesting to me. But I think all of this information is very useful, and will, as Adna said, be posted both on our YouTube and also on the website as well. And I also want to mention, since there do not seem to be any questions at this point, but if you enjoyed this, we are working on other presentations like this. And the next thing we have coming up is not so much a presentation, but a discussion. And I will drop the link for this also in the chat. But prior to the pandemic, VSSJ was doing a semi-monthly, we shot for every month, but it didn't always work out that way, conversation series where we would go and meet usually at Mom's Organic Market in Cherry Hill. We did it a few times in the Whole Foods in Cherry Hill and the Whole Foods out in, I don't know if that's not Laurel, if that's Marlton, the one on 73. And we would just have conversations about different vegetarian and vegan related topics. And since we're not able to meet in person safely due to the pandemic, we are starting to do them again virtually. So the next one that we are going to be holding is on the 13th of December, which is a Sunday, at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm not a sports fan. Apparently that is prime football time. So we're going to see how attendance is for this one, and we might alter it from there. So we are going to be talking about ethical gift giving, and not tied to a specific holiday, but there are a number of different holidays that are celebrated towards the end of the month and into January. And so we want to talk about different sustainable, environmentally friendly, and particularly plant-based ways you can gift. It doesn't have to be a physical item. There's a number of other organizations out there, VSSJ included, that are doing good, sustainable, ethical work. We would love to hear what your favorite ethical gift you've either given or received is happening. So as I said, I will put that in the chat, how you can register for that. It's Zoom just like this. And so that is our next one of these. And we've got a bunch of things we are planning for January. but I will ask again, does anyone have any questions? You can either unmute or you can put it in the chat if you would like to, or I guess everyone might just be a little overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information that Sadhna just shared with us. You are welcome to also email me. I put my email in the chat, or you can also email just info@vssj.com if you have another question as well.
Yeah. Looks like I just overwhelmed everybody. That's a good thing.
Hey, great.
Gives you food for thought.
And it is possible. I don't know everyone's story, but I know I was not really a Zoom user prior to this pandemic. I'm a librarian, and so a lot of my work moved online, and so I've become pretty proficient in Zoom. But I know not everyone who is attending this might be, and that's okay. So I think this is a good spot to end. And so I thank everyone for attending this evening. If this was the first event you ever attended for VSSJ, welcome. I hope we see you again at another event. And if you are returning, thank you very much for coming again. And we also hope to see you at another event. And thank you very much, Sadhna, for all of this great information. And as I said before you go, please check the chat. I did link how to get to membership, and also you can just visit our website at vssj.com. And our ethical gift giving event, which is coming up in a few weeks, that discussion, that is also linked in the chat as well. So I hope everyone has a very healthy, safe, and happy December. And if you are celebrating anything later in the month or into January, I hope it is a nice celebration. Is there anything you would like to say, Sadhna?
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather, for all that good information. Thank you, everyone, for joining and attending. I'm glad to have you with us. And have a wonderful holiday.
Okay.
Great to see you all.
All right, yes. All right, so there are a few people who said great information and thank you in the chat. So this was a fantastic presentation, and we hope to get you to come back and give another one at some point soon. So I hope everyone has a great night and a good rest of your December.